Samuel struggled to haul in his net. He had caught something big, and it was splashing around all over the place. He had never caught something so big before, so was very excited to see what it was. But his excitement soon turned into confusion as the animal inside his net looked nothing like a fish. Samuel sprung into action, desperate to save the animal. But the one question remained. What could it be? Samuel, an aspiring fisherman, was out on his boat to practice his net-throwing technique. He was his father's apprentice, and he wanted to do good by him. So on his days off, he would usually sail the sea on his own, just like today. Little did he know, he wouldn't only catch a fish today. There were a few waves here and there, but other than that, it was a perfect day for sailing. Samuel truly enjoyed his days alone, as he could truly focus on himself. He had thrown the net into the water in the morning, so by 12 o'clock, it was time to see if he had caught something. Slowly, he reeled in his net. It was always a thrilling moment, hoping he would see something flapping around in there. But sadly, he hadn't caught anything. Disappointed but not defeated, he threw his net back into the sea. He knew he wouldn't always be able to catch something. He decided to sail a bit further and try to locate a better fishing spot. He was now almost half an hour away from shore, and there weren't a lot of boats passing by. The waiting game began once again, and Samuel passed his time by reading a book in the sun. Suddenly, he heard a strange splashing sound coming from one of his nets. He jumped up and looked over the rail of his boat, but the animal splashed around so aggressively that Samuel couldn't make out what it was. One thing he could see, though, was that the animal in question was very big. There was no time to spare, so Samuel immediately sprung into action. He pulled his net out of the water, or at least tried to, as the net was way too heavy. He had never caught a fish this big and heavy before, and he almost didn't manage to get the net all the way out of the water. When he got the net to hover above the water's edge, he looked over the railing again to see what he had caught. He didn't want to pull a shark onto his boat, as he really thought that would be the only reasonable explanation for the size and weight of this thing. But little did he know, it wasn't a fish at all. Excitedly, Samuel looked over the railing, but his excitement quickly faded at the sight of the strange animal. Samuel had to do a double take, as he had no idea what he was looking at. It kind of looked like a wet wool sweater, but that couldn't have made the splashing sound. Suddenly, the wet clump of fur began to move, and two big eyes suddenly looked up at Samuel. Samuel's eyes widened in shock as he realized what he had caught. "What in the world?" Samuel stammered to himself. He ran to the end of the net's rope and began to pull again. This animal didn't belong in the water. As he tried to pull the animal onto his boat, it began to move around again, swinging the net from side to side. It made Samuel's job even harder, as the animal kept getting stuck behind his fender. The wet fur was probably the reason why the animal was so heavy, so when Samuel failed to get the animal onto his boat, he had to change tactics. Samuel decided to let the animal air dry inside the net for a bit. It was hovering above the water, so as long as it didn't manage to escape the net, it wouldn't get wet again. Every 10 minutes, Samuel would check on the animal, and slowly, he watched the animal's fur change into a lighter, drier color. After about 30 minutes, he tried to pull the animal on board again, and this time, he had it a lot easier. Finally, the animal fell onto the deck. Frozen in shock, the animal looked around it, trembling in fear. It looked exhausted, so Samuel filled a small bowl with fresh drinking water. The animal was still stuck in the net, but Samuel decided to keep it this way so it wouldn't be able to escape. As he observed the animal, who was now drinking the fresh water Samuel had put down, he noticed how much it looked like a cat. But what was it doing so far from shore? Samuel decided he had to sail back to shore to get the animal checked by a veterinarian. Being so long in the salty water wasn't good for anyone, so the animal could have internal damage. He turned his boat around and began his route back, turning his attention away from the animal. When the shore was almost in sight, Samuel turned around to check on the animal, but to his surprise, the net was empty. Samuel's heart sank. Where could the animal be? He ran to the back of the boat to check the water around, But there was no sign of the cat splashing around anywhere. It had to be somewhere on his boat still, but where? Samuel quickly ran back to the helm of his boat and dropped his anchor. He had to find the animal before he could dock the boat, as he was afraid the animal would run away as soon as land was in sight. Samuel looked everywhere inside his boat, from the sleeping area to the bathroom, but the animal was nowhere to be seen. Lastly, he suddenly realized there was a cool box he kept on deck to keep the fish he caught cool and fresh on his journey back. If this animal were a cat, then that place would be perfect to hide in. After making sure the cat was locked up, he continued his journey to shore. There, he docked his boat and called a veterinarian clinic close by. He explained what had happened and asked if he should bring the animal in. The vet made sure Samuel knew how important it was the cat got a checkup, so Samuel knew he had no other choice. But the true question was, how would he get the animal to the vet? He could transport it while it was still inside the cooler, but there was no ventilation, so that wouldn't be responsible. There was also one more problem, as Samuel didn't have a car. He had spent all his money on his sailboat. He decided transporting the cat inside a crate was the best option, as the wooden slats had air gaps between them. He quickly searched his boat for one of his old fishing crates and threw everything that was in it on the ground. Then he placed a can of tuna he had in his fridge inside. He placed the crate in front of his bathroom door and slowly opened it. It didn't take long for the cat to follow its nose and get inside the crate. Samuel quickly threw a piece of netting over it and tied a rope around the sides so the cat wouldn't be able to escape while en route. As he walked to his bike, many people raised their eyebrows. They were probably all wondering what a fisherman was doing with a cat in his crate, and Samuel had to admit it had to be a strange sight. But he had to ignore all the strange faces and get to the vet as quick as possible. He placed the crate on the back of his bike, but realized he had nothing to secure it with. The only way he would be able to transport this animal to the vet was by walking beside his bike and holding onto the crate. But that would take him 30 minutes. No, there had to be another way. "Sam!" someone suddenly yelled from behind. "Sam, what are you doing?" It was Samuel's father. "I need your help, Dad!" Samuel yelled as he pointed to the crate on his bike. His father had a car, so he hoped he would be able to bring him to the vet. "What do you have there?" his father asked. "You're never going to believe what I caught in my net today," Samuel said with a glimmer in his eye. "A cat!" He watched the confusion on his father's face form and chuckled. "I know, right? I have to bring it to the vet but have nothing to secure it with. Could you bring us?" Together with his father, Samuel went to the vet. As the vet examined the cat, his eyes widened in shock. "You found this animal in the sea?" he said with a stunned tone. "This is not a cat at all, it's a lynx!" Samuel couldn't believe what he was hearing. Those animals didn't even live around here. His eyes filled with tears as he realized what must have happened. The animal was probably being smuggled across the sea and managed to escape, only to land in the water, struggling to survive. If Samuel hadn't been there then... Samuel cried at the thought. But luckily he was there, and he saved the animal. The lynx was brought to a sanctuary where it was monitored until it regained its strength. Then it was brought back to its homeland and set free again, railed in his net. It was always a thrilling moment, hoping he would see something flapping around in there. But sadly, he hadn't caught anything. Disappointed but not defeated, he threw his net back into the sea. He knew he wouldn't always be able to catch